Hello, everyone. Welcome to Accented. I'm Isabelle, the ED of Divan. I will start today by honoring the Ohlone people on which land I'm standing on today, as I'm introduce you the event. You know, for those who know me, right, I usually don't see me coming on Accented. I think it's my first time. I usually stay behind the scene because I feel more comfortable this way. And regardless of how much I achieve, I always feel like it's not my place to speak. And I understand that this feeling doesn't come from nowhere, right? It was taught. So I will say this now, you know, this is my place and this is our place. Okay, so today I came here, you know, to be with all of you, right? Because we need each other. I feel that. And to be with each other. You know, today I think of my aunts, my family who work in nail salons. You know, yes, you know, what happened in Atlanta on the 16th could have happened to them. The violence against Asian American, and that is happening now where I live in San Francisco, the Bay Area, all around the country, could happen to any of us. You know, Asian Americans, you know, we are all connected by the sheer fact that many cannot see the ethnic difference between us. We are also connected because of our empathy toward the victims and our fears for those we love and for our own selves. Divan drafted a statement of solidarity. You know, it'll be posted tomorrow on our Facebook page along with some resources pertaining to anti-Asian violence. You know, here we'll share with you the resource page. If you want to know more about Divan and our 6 program and bookshelf with over 100 diasporic Vietnamese literary book, go to our new website at divan.org. I'm also here for our program, She Was No Master, we started to build right a few years ago because we've recognized that Vietnamese American women writers have unique challenges to create freely, right, which in the realm of writing can mean to speak up freely and to be published. Divan, you must maybe know, right, was created about 15 years ago because we understood that America was a society found on the belief that it belongs to Anglo-Saxon, which with time came to mean for white people. The history of this country is marked by racial tension, struggle, and resistance. And what is happening today is not new, right? The view that Asians are carriers of disease or object that craze white men against their wills, right, is not new. So our right and a sense of safety and sense of self came from people like, you know, you guys, us, right, the poet, the artists, you know, the Divan's team, right? We all join hands and standing up and organize, right, so that story can be heard. For Divan, the work has been to imagine and make space so that we can be more empowered, right, as a community and be heard, right, with respect as creator, oh, my accent, and understood as a community and as a people. You know, our stories and poetry are important. They have the power to humanize us, and the ability to be heard can help us humanize ourselves to ourselves. One way to fight violence is to fight for our full humanities, for our stories, as diverse, as complex as it may be, can be more visible, more heard, more public. On this note, it's now my pleasure and honor to present our panelists today. Thi Bui, the author of The Best We Could Do, will join us a little bit later for the tarot reading. But first, let me tell you a little bit about poet Hoa Nguyen. Hoa was born in the Mekong Delta and raised and educated in the US. Hoa Nguyen has lived in Canada since 2011. She's the author of several books, including Red Juice, poem 1998-2008, and Violet Energy Ingots, which was nominated for a Griffin Poetry Prize. A forthcoming book, 1,000 Times You Lose Your Treasure, is a poetic meditation on historical, personal, and cultural pressures pre- and post-Fall-of-Saigon, with verse biography on the poet mother, Diệp Anh Nguyễn, a stunt motorcyclist in an all-woman Vietnamese circus troupe, right? So you don't see image of Vietnamese women like this. Pretty amazing. A popular teacher of poetics. Hoa teaches for Miami University Law Residency MFA program. She's a co-chair of writing in the Milton Avery School of Fine Arts at Bard College and as associated faculty for University of Guelph, as well as occasional reading-focused writing workshops that take place in cyberspace. Also, it's a pleasure to have Dao Strom on the panel. She's an artist who works with 3 voices, written, sung, visual, to explore hybridity and the intersection of personal and collective histories. She's the author of the poetry collection Instruments and its musical companion piece, Traveler's Ode, a bilingual poetry art book, You Will Always Be Someone from Somewhere Else, a memoir, We Were Meant to Be a Gentle People, and Song Cycle, East-West, and 2 books of fiction, The Gentle Order of Girls and Boys, and Grass Roof, Tin Roof. Her work has received support from the Creative Capital Foundation, Precipice Fund, NEA, and others. Born in Vietnam, Dao Strom grew up in the Sierra Nevada foothill of Northern California and live in Portland, Oregon. She's a co-founder and creative director of She Was No Master. Please welcome Ms. Hoa Nguyen and Dao Strom.
This off by reading a statement and addressing a veteran, I speaker prepared that things to address the localities you're from lands with the more known cloud, Calapooya, and many other tribes in the region known as Portland, Oregon. For Hoa, from Toronto, the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Métis, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation in the Dish with One Spoon territory. As writers who are refugees, immigrants, and descendants of refugees from another land, we humbly acknowledge that we are visitors and settlers who've taken refuge in and from these lands. Okay, is my audio okay? Before Hoa and I start our conversation, I wanted to acknowledge the violent, racist, misogynist events of this week that are causing much grief and heartbreak and fear in our AAPI communities. And that we understand these events are a continuation of conditions related to white supremacy, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, racial misogyny, and a rhetoric of anti-Asian hate that has been evident in this culture for the length of its history, but has become even more egregiously pervasive in the past year. We stand in sorrow with the victims in Atlanta, in Oakland, and in solidarity with organizations, individuals, communities fighting against anti-Asian hate and racism in all of its forms. She Who Has No Masters is a collective project that brings together the voices of women and non-binary writers of the Vietnamese diaspora. We are writers with individual practices, but we also come together to collaborate and generate work collectively. As Asian and Vietnamese women in particular, the events of this week have reminded us of something we already know too well: how Asian female bodies are fetishized, hypersexualized, and objectified in Western culture. And how normalized this has become, so much so that its plain fact is somehow invisible or too obvious to even seriously consider. This tendency to regard certain bodies as objects, we also understand, has deeper roots than just being, as the white establishment might like to insist, the unfortunate byproduct of a single man's unique case of sexual addiction. We understand rather that this connects to a much larger picture, and it's something that Divan is very engaged in addressing also. histories of imperialism, colonialism, militarization in Asia. Our collective's goal since we initiated in 2015 has been nothing less than to combat invisibility, discrimination, underrepresentation, to in effect break the silence that often enshrouds the lives and experiences of Vietnamese women and non-binary persons. This narrative of our silence and invisibility is both false and true, because the truth is many of us in voice and actions have not been silent at all. It is only the refusal of others to recognize, to hear, to see, to make efforts to understand that keeps our stories muffled. This problem of not hearing, not seeing the labor, experiences, vitalities, and realities of women in more vulnerable bodies is a very real problem in our culture at large. We write despite and against that. While we make our work in awareness of these broader and externally imposed dynamics, I'd like to also point out that responding to these frameworks and these external gazes also doesn't define the whole breadth of our work. Our collective's goal has always been to represent Vietnamese women and non-binary persons as full spectrum entities, as multifaceted, uncontainable, untypecastable, with stories that may be harrowing, ordinary, celebratory, defiant, bound to family and culture, or wayward of it, and more. She Who Has No Masters is at heart a poetry project, an experimental art project, and a labor of love. A very small salve to offer, perhaps in the current climate. However, we want to offer this space today as its own kind of resistance, in the form of our simply being here and being together. Today, our offering is also alchemical. We're bringing the practice of tarot, which is an intuitive process, engaging a non-academic mind frame to our conversation about poetry. We hope you'll enjoy this space with us, and we're also going to have a Q&A at the end, so there's room for people to share comments and questions, especially about this week's events. And I'm going to bring Hoa on also, and we'll talk a little bit more about this tarot framework, and maybe some of the things that we've all been thinking about in this week will also kind of turn up in the cards or in the conversation we're thinking. So, hi Hoa, how are you?
Thank you for the beautiful framing. It's been a hard time the last couple of days, just surfacing a lot of what we already know, as you said. And in preparing for our conversation, actually last week, I gave myself, I checked in with my deck, the tarot, a deck of 78 cards. It has a beginning that's sometimes considered shrouded in mysteries, other times considered pretty straightforward. It's a game of cards that has built references across its use and meanings and other correspondences with other systems. When I read for checking in with the deck about our conversation, I drew a card that usually unnerves me, and it did then, which is the Three of Swords, which is in the most famous depiction, a heart in a floating field of sky with three swords struck through the center of it. And I thought to myself, why am I getting this card for my conversation with Dao and Thi? And I thought, because I thought of the three of us and the three swords, and what is this this heart piercing. And then earlier this week, I realized that it has to do with the kinds of ways in which the given is a state of treachery that you're always having to negotiate, and that part of it is a piercing through to a new possibility, and that's one of the meanings inside of that card. So today I checked in with the cards, and I wanted to show you one of them. This is from a deck that's called the Shining Tribe, And I think you can see this one's called The Six of Birds. You see a raptor under a big yellow sun and a sleeping, reclining female figure actually here. And one of the meanings for it is a time to trust the intuitive knowledge and the information from like the dream world, information from places other, which seems to be a correct card for what we propose today. And then the other I thought could lead into my first question for you, because I'm also interested, in addition to tarot, in talking about your work as an artist. I think you can see this card, hopefully okay. It's called the Seven of Birds, and you see these two figures, and I think of them as you and I, and there's a boundaried space and birds flying in the sky above them. And the action that they're taking, their mouths are open, is that they are singing to each other. And the meaning in the Seven of Birds, as Rachel Pollack draws it in The Shining Tribe, is the occasion for individuals to come together and to sing into the boundaries between us. And I think of your poetry as a place that inhabits those sort of boundaried spaces and talks across those boundaries that are permeated with sound, but other modes of narration. So I was wondering, Dao, if you would talk a little bit about your latest book from Phonograph called Instrument, thinking about your singing into those spaces. And maybe you can begin by talking a little bit about the naming of the book. Then the book, as you know, I had the pleasure of writing about, and I wrote about how it's textured with both the visual and the sonic, and create spaces where we can be held, where language or narrative fails. And I thought I could invite you to talk about it. And then while you're talking, I was going to manipulate the cards and, with your permission, pull a couple of cards in response to your answers to further elaborate.
Thank you so much for that, Hoa. That was wonderful and beautiful. I first want to ask, it looks like there's some question in the comment about the name of the deck. I wonder if the deck that you're using, if you could share that with people. I'm trying to think what the birds correlate with in the classic deck.
Swords or air.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that's lovely. The birds are apt because I also have kind of a fascination with birds, or I've used that as imagery symbols in my own work. In one of my previous books, I actually took some photographs of myself wearing wings. I had this vision of of wearing wings, and then I wanted to go back to Vietnam and stand in some certain places, and I visited some sites of the Champa, and I wanted to stand there and wear wings, and a part of me was also, in my sort of the mythos that I'd created in my mind, had to do with the origin tale of Vietnam, of the mother. I'm sure people know this story, who shows up as a fairy, and there's some versions of the tale where she shows up as sort of a bird entity, and the bird entity also shows up in other cultures' folk tales, of course. So there's that. I kind of thought of my writing from that point of view as being like a daughter, like one of the lost children of this entity, and trying to return, and of course being grounded or flightless. I also think of birds as I think of it in terms of voice and singing. So with instrument, the birds are like, I think of the voice, like the book very much explores a lot to do with voice, and voice manifests in different mediums or different ways, different forms of voice. on the page in poetry and visual and also musical. And there's also, the birds are like really hard to contact as far as like voice goes. So this, you know, sort of the practice of writing, and I think the practice of doing creative work is like this, you're trying to communicate with some other part of yourself, or however you want to look at it, your muses. And sometimes I think of those entities as birds in a sort of otherworldly way. And trying to hear them is like this delicate matter that relates to something, and it's also something very Vietnamese to me. So whether it's like trying to get in touch with something that's you know, however you want to interpret that. But so that was some of the naming of the book. Was I actually had the thought of a book named Instrument, and definitely wanting to explore sort of that intersection between poetry and music, and the point at which the writing, the language, the verbal language, or the written language, or the abstract, you know, the way the language and words are circulating in my mind actually become this embodied force or energy that I'm also trying to connect. And there's something in that space in between. And then also instrument also resonates as body. And I have some poems in the book that talk a little bit about some of the things that, you know, the things that we're feeling that I mentioned in my opening words, just about the experiences of walking around in the world in this particular kind of body, and the external like impositions and expectations that are placed on it. So I kind of wanted a title that would address, you know, that would just be a space that I could work in, that it could address that mixture of themes.
The choice also reminds me a little bit of your use of punctuation. You also, as I remember, had brackets that contained and don't contain things. It's interesting, as I was listening to your response to my question, I pulled some cards, and a card that came up is a card that I know came up for me when I was making my manuscript, which was the Tower. And this is the Rider-Waite drawing of the Tower card. You can see the structure being struck by lightning, a sort of crown coming off the top, and bodies flying, but not not flightless, but different. And then the card that came after it, that arrived after it, is the Five of Cups. So the figure is standing, contemplating some spilled goblets, 3 of them. 2 are behind the figure, who seems to be adopting a posture of mourning. Their head is down, they're looking away from the viewer, and they're actually contemplating a space by water, which seemed like an important piece in viewing this card. And together I was thinking about how your book contains themes of the Tower, which include that space in which language also fails. You know, the Tower, of course, biblically is tied to a biblical story that has to do with languages coming in contact and not making sense together, and actually creating something tumultuous that is also a kind of symbol of the end of empire, or a sort of a consequence of empire, or a consequence of destruction, that is a sort of phallic symbol, you know, of containers that are fortified, containers that provide structure, but that ultimately collapse. And that the person, the figure in mourning, that Five of Cups card, is like looking down at the water, which I think is also something that I think of in your work, as activated in your work, in a gesture of mourning. But it's also a gesture of recovery, because the 2 cups remain standing behind the figure, even though there's something to grieve or recognize. So I thought that was a really beautiful commentary on what you had to say. And then actually the outcome, heavy cards, someone said in a comment. But the outcome of those two cards were at the center actually is a beautiful card of celebration, which is the Four of Wands. You can see the two in the center celebrating under an outdoor sort of wedding celebration. And it's really a card of community.
That all makes, I mean, that makes apt sense. I think there's a lot of grief processes, or there's, you know, certain things about trauma that I'm exploring in the book in my own way. And I also do think of that Tower card as like, you know, everything's coming down. It's like the things that you believe in or the things that you've relied on are being challenged. And there is like also the potential of like revelation beyond that. So yeah, thank you for pulling those. I feel like it's an apt transition to ask you my question about your book, which, as we mentioned earlier, or we've talked about a little bit before, there are a number of poems in your book that also reference the Tower, and there are a couple like love ghost stories that involve towers or are located near towers. In the poem Failed Tower Ka Zao, there's this line, which I really love. Myth and history twist, exile into a tower structure, also called mouth. And a little further, there's these two lines, the sight of mother, my longing in language. And I also recall a story that you told me about of when you last visited Vietnam and you had this experience with a tower. And I don't know if you want to go into that, but I'm curious to hear how the tower configures in these poems, this book in particular, and what it means for you in your work. And if you have thoughts about it sort of related to the literature of the diaspora, literature written by Vietnamese women. I know we've already sort of mentioned that the like also phallic like symbology in that card. And how would you like people to think about the tower? What would you like this motive like to bring up for people experiencing your book and these tower poems?
I mean, the journey with the tower symbol is sort of a longer story, but I'll maybe just really briefly say something about it. Maybe I can also read that poem as another thing, and I would also want to hear some of your work too. So while I'm answering my short version of the long tower story, you can think about a poem that might be good as a follow-up for when I turn it to you. But the tower card came up for me when I visited Vietnam last, which is actually the only time that I've visited Vietnam. I left, like you, I left just short of 2 years old, and I lost my language in that transition by the choices made within my family to assimilate and to do the things that you do to survive, which is to learn the language of your new home. And so I grew up with a sort of this gap that I experience in many different ways of languagelessness. But the theme of the tower came back most, I think, strikingly when I had a tarot reading at the request of at my request. My friend gave me a reading, and one of the significant cards was a tower card, and I was quite nervous because I was already nervous to go back. I was concerned about being overwhelmed with the experience as a person without the Vietnamese language, as a person coming back for the first time without my mother. My mother never went back. She then it was too late for her to go back. She became too ill to go back. And so I didn't have like a guide or family to greet me. So I felt very sort of alone and orphaned in my experience, even though as I was meeting up with some literary people in Hanoi. But as I was getting ready to do that, I was having different experiences that were very unlike the tower, just getting to know a city I didn't know during a holiday season. So it was kind of quiet. I was at Tet. But I was very wary that the tower might happen to me at any time. I might be suddenly feeling like I'm being struck by lightning or falling from great heights and, torn down from the experience emotionally. But none of that happened. And one day I went into a park visiting with now the guests that I had intended to meet, who are also literary people. And while we were there were families around because it was Tet. And I happened to notice, because you couldn't help but notice, there was a big commotion with a loudspeaker and people speaking excitedly promoting something. And so I asked the host I was with what they were up to. And they said, well, there's a motorcycle stunt thing set up over there for Tet. And I said, what? So basically the story is that I happened upon, like, the only time in this park that a motorcycle stunt performance would be set up in this city that I had traveled so far to come to by accident. And so I was able to visit the performance, and I was quite astonished and took all these photos. And then as I was leaving, I turned and took a picture of the structure, which is a cylindric structure. You climb the stairs to get to the top of it, and then you stand at the top and you look down the cylinder. And as you're looking down, you see that, oh yes, it's got a round bottom, and the circus performers enter from the bottom and they go around until they're perpendicular on the side, and they can perform these sort of gravity-defying feat of circling this barrel or wall of death. This is the thing that my mother had done in 1956 to 1960 in Vietnam with her troupe called Viet. And I had come to sort of address sort of this lost place and these kind of remnants that I could try to connect there. And then it met me. And of course, I became quite overtaken with the immensity of having stumbled upon the very thing that I didn't think I would ever find in a million years, that it met me. So that the symbol of the tower was both, can be like calamity, convulsive times, not unlike the time in which I arrived in the world, which is the height of the US war in Vietnam. The Tet Offensive was just a year after I was born. My mother was in great danger because she had a mixed child and was raising her unmarried. And so the sort of theme of convulsivity has been one around my mother's sort of life story, but then it was also shrouded in great mystery. So the tower also became a symbol of trying to like crack open that silence. And it was very dramatic when I saw the performance had come to find me as much as I went to find it.
Can we show this picture? I just want, since this is what Hoa is talking about.
Yeah,
so pictures. This one especially, you can see, wait, this one, where you can see perpendicular on the wall. I love this picture, and I especially love the expression on your mother's face. Like, she looks so powerful. And then it's interesting because the people viewing are mostly men standing up there. There's so much in these images, and I feel like that sort of, is something I really hope that people will look at and take a look at about Hua's book. That this like, I think we talked about the word wayward and women, and I think both of us have mothers that have would qualify as wayward, that did very unconventional things. And this is like, there's no stereotype that this image of your mother fits into, which I love. I pulled some cards while you were talking, and I know a little bit about tarot. I'm not the kind of person that is comfortable enough reading other people's cards, so I'm going to show them to you, and maybe we can talk about them. I'm pulling from a deck called the Dark Exact Tarot, which is made by a friend of mine here in Portland, Coleman Stevenson, who is also a poet and a visual artist and a tarot artist and designer, of course. And these are, show you. So I pulled this one while you said the word languageless. So the King of Wands, or the King of Rods. And then as you were talking about describing the search or coming back, and the people you were meeting with, this is the Page of Rods, which sort of fits with the being in a new place or being open to some new process. A lot of rods, because when you got to the part about the tower and finding the tower and this revelation of it being happening on something that was like, an echo of what your mother had been doing, you came with the Seven of Rods, which this card is very puzzling for me. I have a hard time knowing what to make of this one, or like there's something, it's like, why is that one like hovering above the other ones? So the rods have a lot to do with work or effort, and something that you're consciously working on materializing in the world. So I'm open to hearing how does that reflect for you?
Well, I love all the fire. I was born in the year of the fire horse, in the very last lunation of the fire horse, and I think of those rods in the Rider-Waite deck. They're often drawn. I think they're drawn with, they're like blooming. Like there's actually leaves coming off the end. And the poet H.D., who also worked with the tarot, she called them flowering rods, and which I appreciate the idea of the fire actually being a kind of flowering. And if you think of spring, you think of it's emergent and it's coming up with the force that's not destructive force, but the force of creation, right? And the force of meeting the sun, meeting up with radiance and being radiance. And it reminded me actually of a poem that I wrote in 1,000 Times You Lose Your Treasure. That's called She Led with Flower Rods. And it's actually after a different card that was trending for me when I was writing the manuscript, because it felt very weighty. This 10 of Rods, which is often is in the Coleman Smith deck, the person with their back to the viewer, holding up like many rods in their hands, like sort of leading with them. And so that's actually how I named that poem. And it's the sort of idea of like having to like carry all this weight from one spot to another, sort of leading with them in a sense of offering, but also kind of defense. But I'm trying to find She Leads with Flower Rods, but I'm having trouble finding it. Just be a second. And then I was going to read The Failed Tower Cadeau. And the cadeau is a folk form in Vietnamese that's oral. So I was trying to write one, and then I kept failing to write it. And I decided that it would be part of the story of the poem. is that it, like a tower itself falling down, the poem itself is also kind of falling down as part of its expression. Failed tower cadeau, sonnet tied to the sky, struck by lightning. In that one film version of Frankenstein, who was it that feared the storm and lightning? Myth and history twist exile into a tower structure, also called mouth, that feeling of headlong, the sight of mother, my longing in language. See my eyes ruby red, I feed on toxic flowers, kiss one or any flower, rise clean from mud water, row a pedal boat, absurd longing to sing the sun, to exist and live an island of. And then I'll read She Leads with Flower Rods, and then I might ask you to throw me a poem, if you wouldn't mind. Here's the second poem. She leads with flower rods. Made by the dead puppeteer, the rings found them, it seemed, dry, papery magenta flowers of the wild bougainvillea. Multiple ghosts jab your throat, thorns in the uninterrupted kitchen dream. They could see it was perfect, so their prophecy was fulfilled. So the lung-smothered dies, so they wrote down their dreams, their way made unpassable, so fall through worlds, dashing the red gourd of light on the way.
Thank you. That was really beautiful. Flowered rods. I like that. Like that fits with the cards that I pulled. I'll read a couple poems, and I wanted to read some of the ones that were, sort of related to thoughts that arose this week. But I think from that section of the book, I'm going to read a poem that is actually, I don't know how to pronounce this word, cento. Is that like the correct way to pronounce it? So this poem form is actually a poem that's made up of lines pulled from other poems. And I did this one actually using poems that are in the anthology Troubling Borders, which is a Divan publication and edited by Isabel Tripolode and Lan Zung and other editors. And it is an anthology of Southeast Asian women of the diaspora, art and poetry. And I wrote this poem actually as an exercise that was in a class I was taking. And it was based on a color swatch. And the color swatch that I pulled was yellow. And the name of this color was Treasure Seeker. So the title of the poem is Color Swatch 0945 Treasure Seeker. And the lines in this poem, I want just to this is a sort of shout out to other Southeast Asian Vietnamese women and the Troubling Borders anthology. This contains like lines pulled from 9 different poets from different places in that anthology. So porridge and urine staining the edges along those old scales of humanity and savagery. Other Asian. Each of the girls wears a number, then circles. This is a scream, not a shout out. We are evidence, evidence of truth, evidence of strength, evidence of the country waxed and contained. You are still my enemy, Asian America. You are my enemy. I am from. And then I'll read a poem related to sort of the other themes that we were talking about, which are the birds and voice. And I guess this would be the title poem of the book. It's called Instrument. I have wanted to be a sieve. I have wanted to be an anechoic chamber and reflect back to you, no sound, but for the quiet rush and thrum of your own nervous blood. I have wanted to be instrument and not just body to be felt the cleavage of the world through, but instead to splay the invisible light waned out through skin and rushes, a bird wing desire, a light and under fire. I walked out into the burning est woken of time. Am I acting vist enough as light in the interim inner of darkness, now entering the machine in knowing of cloak and insidious of wonder and plunder, not to seek satisfaction in peaks and difficult in climb and into surrender's don'ts. I walked out into the brilliant wokenness of time and everything was tritest. So
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dao.
thank you. Do we want to sort of move on to our vernal equinox like spread that we're going to talk about and sort of start to segue? I think we might be close to our break time, so I'll just give a little bit of framing. We are going to do the vernal equinox spread. This is the vernal equinox. I think it's technically tomorrow, right? So we're moving into spring. I was reading the astrology report for this week, and one of the things, you know, there is supposed to be a marked like shift of energy that's coming in, and I think, you know, a lot has happened this week, and we're kind of arriving at a different place energetically than we began it, for sure. And I kind of wonder what that means just in terms of, you know, what it galvanizes for us as a community also. We are going to lay out the spread, and Hua's going to also invite people, if you have your own cards, to do the same. And then we're going to talk about it a little more when we come back from the break and have tea. Bui also join us and receive a tarot reading. And there will be also an option, I believe, for an audience member to get a reading or ask a question. So yes, oh, sorry, I'm like looking at the chat too and like answering the question. But so put your questions in the chat if you're interested in joining in that part of our discussion. And the name of the anthology that I pulled, that I wrote the Cento poem based on, is Troubling Borders. And it is also on the Divan website. And it's a really beautiful volume. It's been taught in universities also. It's beautiful in that it has artwork and color pictures and poetry. So highly recommend people to check it out.
I love that we got to sing into each other's borders today with our poems. Yeah, the vernal equinox spread. So those of you that would like to also join us by conducting your own vernal equinox spread, this is what you have to do. You might want to write this down. So you're going to pick 5 cards from your deck, and you can, you know, select them at random at however you choose to do that. The first card, you're going to call that the seed. The second card, you're going to call that the water. The third card, you're going to call that the bloom. The fourth card is the debris clean or the spring clean. And the fifth card is growth. It's like the shoots coming up. So you're going to have 5 cards. And I think we have a link that from the spread that I actually got this idea from that we can put down. But so you're going to have 5 cards. The first one, seed. The second one, water. Third one, bloom. Fourth, clean. The fifth, growth. And so you can select your cards during the break. You can also get yourself a beverage. We have a beautiful mixology thing to share with you on the other side of the break. And we'll also talk a little bit about our vernal equinox spread before we introduce Thi Bui for a personal tarot reading, and then after which we'll take questions from the chat for a reading with me and Dao.
Hello there. My name is Tui Fan, and I run the Mixophoria account on Instagram. First, I just wanted to say thank you to Dao, Hua, T, and everyone at DVAN for creating this space for us after such a heavy week. And thank you for having me on this to share a drink that I created for everyone for tonight. It's called the Spring Equinox here. And I made this drink because it's tea-based to align with our theme tonight. And in this drink, I made it with vodka, and you can steep it with tea. And I suggested oolong tea or green tea. Oolong if you wanted a more earthy flavor, green tea if you liked a more floral or grassy flavor. I thought it might be good for spring now as we're changing seasons. It also has fresh grapefruit juice and lemon juice to bring some brightness and tartness to the drink. And then your favorite honey, just to round out the flavors. And the honey really shows through with the tea and the citrus. So if you don't drink alcohol, though, there is a non-alcoholic version. So you would keep all the ingredients the same, but just brew your tea really strongly with hot water, and then add a little bit of club soda to give it a little sparkle. So I hope you all enjoy this, and thank you for creating this space for us again. Cheers. Oh, yes. Enjoy.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I garnished mine with kumquat because it's what I had, and rosemary because that was also on the recommendation.
Yours is much prettier than mine. I just put mine in like a teacup, but my teacup has a picture of my cat and a durian fruit.
Tea, it's so good to see you. I was hoping that I would catch you. You've been so active with both your own creative projects, but also actively combating this problem, this growing loudness of Asian hate crimes. And I've been hoping that you are making space for your own creativity during this difficult time. Because the last time I saw you, we were in a much different circumstance. We were in the middle of thinking about diasporic Vietnamese experiences and perspectives as creators and as women. T, I was hoping that you had a question for me that you could ask the cards, and I want to thank you too for being willing to have your cards read publicly like this. It's sort of a special thing.
Hi, Hoa. Hi, Dao. It's so nice to see you. I don't do too many of these Zoom events. I've been attending a lot of them, and it's been great to be able to see people who live in places far away that I wouldn't normally be able to see, like attend their readings. But when you reached out to me a few ago about this, and you said it was a reading, you'd be reading my card. I wouldn't have to do a reading. Yes, I'm down. Also, I've been a huge fan of you. Wait, my sound's bad. What if I unplug this microphone? Okay, how's that? Okay, rookie move. 1 second, I gotta plug in my power tool. I'm a hot mess. I'm doing like you said, I'm doing a lot of things, and thank you for thinking about whether I'm working on my creative practice, because that's what my question is about. A lot has happened, and I've been a big fan of you since I met you in 2018 at our retreat at Jurassic, and you read my cards, and they're burned into my memory. I don't know if you remember, it was 3 cards you pulled. I don't know if you remember what the future card was, but it was a really big deal for me because it gave me a lot of guidance about what to do with my life. And I made some really big changes in my life right afterwards. So Hoa, you pulled the Fool for me. And I've taken it to heart. I really took to heart the joy in that card and the risk taking, and I guess the shortness of life, and how little time we have to like just squeeze as much joy as we can out of it, and that does involve taking a lot of risks. Not everybody likes it when you do, though. And so I think this is now the sequel conversation about like what happens in the aftermath when you fall off the cliff, or somebody pushes you off the cliff, or you get punished sometimes for being a woman who speaks up or takes risks or does things outside of the norm. So in my creative practice, it's true that it's a lot to juggle, like organizing work with your own creative practice, because one is loud and public and the other is more quiet and solitary, and it's hard to find time in the right headspace for both. It's also hard to balance life, but I don't think that my problem, because I'm having a creative block, I don't think that my problem is discipline, because I know what that looks like. I don't think that it's scheduling or making to-do lists or any of the things that you can Google at night and find a lot of self-help blogs about. So this is a really great chance to ask about something more intuitive. And I guess first I want to acknowledge like the events of the week and the emotional stuff. My friend Carolina Doe, who I met last year working on elections, said it best when we asked each other how we were doing. So I don't really know how to answer that question this week. She said, I just mind I quote her. She said, "I'm holding a lot of grief and anger, but also working on the muscle for hope and connection." And I really like that, because it reminds us that we live in bodies, we experience this life in bodies, and there are muscles that tense up when we respond to these events. And they're muscles that we need to relax in order to move on from this like moment of trauma. So on a funner note, I'm learning how to roller skate. I'm actually still wearing my roller skates right now. And that's one life hack that I have for keeping some joy in my life, is I just roller skate around the house while I do things. One thing that I'm learning from roller skating is that, like, to get good at it, I'm not good at all, but my goal is to not fall, basically. But in order to get better at it, it's not about discipline, and it's not about to-do lists, and it's not about watching endless videos and being very, very disciplined about it. It's actually about letting go of my fear and being focused and loose at the same time. So I think what roller skating is teaching me is that in the creative practice, I need to let go of the fear or guilt or whatever negative feelings are tightening up my muscles, and learn how to bring the joy that I know how to have in my life back into my work. So I guess I want to ask, how do I do that? How do I bring the joy that I know how to have back into the work, so that I want to do it, so that I want to get up and do it?
What a great question. I'm so glad that you brought roller skating into it too. Yeah. I love that you remembered that reading I did for you. It felt very significant when I was giving it to you. And I do remember that you drew the Fool, which is a very sort of full body, sort of throwing yourself into like the trusting arms of your, the design that you lay before you. That's the unknown, and it's interesting because right now you're in this space of trying to make work, and the card that comes up a lot for people when I read for creative people came up for you, which is the Knight of Pentacles, which in this deck, which is the Rider-Waite deck, you see that the knight, has a horse that's actually not moving. The hooves are on the ground, and they're holding the coin in their hand. In my other deck, the one that I read with before, the mythic deck, you might remember, it's similarly a rider on a horseback with all hooves on the ground, and in the myth, they chose to illustrate the person as the person who is the god who, he's a demigod. I forget his name. It starts with an A. It's Greek, but anyway, he was the keeper of the beehives. And so the image for you is like you're tending lots of different things, like your projects are these different hives, and the daily tending of the bees is not particularly sexy or glamorous, but it accumulates the honey that then transforms into ambrosia, or the food of the gods. And the other symbol that comes up for you, and so I'm reading this sort of Knight of Pentacles as sort of very much like how you are sort of circling your projects and having like many projects, but it's grounded in like a daily practice. So like you said, the practicality of discipline isn't really the issue, but it's really about risk and play. So the Two of Pentacles also came up, and you can see it's this sort of juggler or jester figure that's holding the two coins with an infinity sign that yokes them to remind you of this ability to risk and play with the materials of your work. But significantly, you drew the Death card. A lot of times people feel concerned about the Death card. Don't feel concerned. It just means it's signaling a grand transformation. Like the flower, the symbol that they carry on the flag, lets you know, as much as sort of the offerings that this child is giving to the rider who is death, that they're actually not to be feared, even as like, there's sort of like, bodies laying waste behind the figure of death. It's like the ability to shed your skin and become like the new being. So something about the transformational aspect of the work is going to be the part that's going to bring about the alchemical transition between honey, the daily helping of the honeybees, into ambrosia. When I showed you death, you were concerned. What came up for you when I shared that it was the card?
I don't know. I'm easily scared. It just seemed like a big, heavy card.
Yeah, people usually get concerned about it, but it's aligned with Scorpio, so it's like it's really powerful. It's like it's birth and death at once. Like the veils between the realms being really thin and giving you the ability to transform. But let's think about your question again. Can you say the question again so that I can see how death is part of how you is sort of the management system?
Sure, let me try again. I guess, how do I let go of fear so that I can be focused and loose in my work at the same time? And how do I stay, it's a two-part question, and how do I stay connected to my joy in my work?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that your first response to the death card was fear. So there is something about thinking about like, what is it about the fear that actually is part of the question, but the releasing of the materials is interesting, because that figure of the juggler who's playing is Oh, and there's a really great comment from Kwei Mai who says, work hard like honeybees and take risks to overcome fears to transform yourselves. That applies to all of us. I love that. Yeah, I do. Death as a management system is another quote someone just highlighted in our comments. Right. There's so like death as a management system, like what needs to die in order for the work to birth might be a question.
Right, the death card is something that needs to end, a way of doing things, a thought pattern. This is interesting. Well, you know, it makes me think of a little bird I used to draw, a motivational bird when I was working on The Best We Could Do. And it was a little black bird that was like shouting, and it was inside its own speech bubble. And what it was shouting was, before you die, damn it. And that was my motivation for finishing that book. Death was like an end point that I had to get things done before. So maybe the concept of death needs to change, right? So that deadlines, right? Deadlines are usually the thing that motivate me, but they're not exactly joyful. So not great for motivating you when your problem is motivation and lack of joy. So how do I rethink death?
Yeah, it is a deep question. How do you rethink death in order to find joy in your work, really? And that Two of Pentacles, that risk and play card, might give you a clue, because it's also in the position that I drew it for you is sort of the like what's coming in, and you can see like the gesture. Like the infinity sign is important because it's also, and in that it's a 2, it's also involving other people. So there's a way in which that search for playfulness might also be ways in which you can open up the work to other forms. That's not just your own, like pulling it out of you. And it's interesting too, when you think about that death, when I look at the death card, there's like several figures that are before the death card that Coleman Smith draws. There's like the child that's unafraid. There's sort of a swooning figure. And then there's sort of a papal figure that's trying to give an offering to death. It might be interesting for you to think of how the bird shouting in the bubble, like which of those figures it was most aligned with.
What are the 3 figures again? There's a pope.
There's sort of like a religious garbed figure here in the yellow. There's sort of a kind of fainting or swooning figure here, and then this child figure here. So in my deck, it's a naked figure giving an offering, but there's often sort of this younger figure who is before death with like a garland of flowers, unafraid. Before you die doesn't seem exactly like that. It seems more like the warning, the person swooning perhaps, or maybe even the popish figure who's saying like, here's an offering so that you don't annihilate me. But the banner that they hold is actually one of blooming. That is the death card, right? Aligned with growth, and there's always like a sun rising off in the distance too. It's like waking into a new possibility. I love Sarah's remark here, that thinking of death as winter and knowing that every year the garden will die back and then you'll have another go takes the pressure off. Sarah is an incredible gardener.
I like gardening metaphors.
Mm-hmm. Also a Scorpio. It is a perfect emblem for spring, for sure. When I think of the death card, I also think of the goddess Oya, who's an African diasporic goddess, who's the goddess of change, and she carries like a machete of truth to cut down like all the old rubble, to extend the gardening metaphor so that the new growth can grow. So there's something too about heralding the change that will be important for you, and also risk and play.
I want a machete of truth.
Mm-hmm. I think you have one.
Thanks. Maybe I'll work on sharpening it, or maybe just wielding it without fear.
Without fear, including the fear of death, I think.
Maybe there's like the fear of falling, you know. I'm just going back to roller skating again, because I've been doing more roller skating than gardening, just to be very honest. You know, it's been pandemic times. But like when you're afraid and you're trying to do a turn, you will fall or just not complete your turn because all your muscles are tensed up. So the fear is just kind of letting go, like I guess the fear of failure and the fear of not doing it right and the fear of not being capable. But I'm still like fascinated with this idea of death, because the Fool, you know, you had me on the Fool for like 2.5 years, and I really took it literally, I think, as like, I need to like pack it in before death. And now you present me with the death card. I'm like, shit, what do I do with this this idea, and how do I think of it as a not a final end, but a transformation,
rebirth.
Yeah.
New beginning.
It's also not like a thing that happens all at once, right? Deaths can take a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially like ego deaths.
Right, a whole system
mm-hmm.
dies off in pieces.
Mm-hmm. It might be helpful to, when I come up with a card that troubles me, actually thinking about the Tower card, there was a period of time where the Tower card was specifically trending for me, and it actually had to do with me moving from Austin, Texas to Toronto. It was a big move at that time in my life, and the Tower card was a card that I kept getting, and I was really resistant to dealing with it because it meant like the collapse of systems and constructs that had held me together. And something similar there is a sort of like greeting this renewal or rebirth is a challenge. So what I did is I took the card and it just made a little like a little sort of set of recognitions around it, like offerings for it, and I had it on my writing desk, or you can keep it wherever you make beautiful things, and greet it. Right.
I like that. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me more about the Two of Pentacles?
Yeah, I mean the Two of Pentacles in I'm thinking of how it's drawn in the Mythic deck, which is a deck that I read from with you before, and it's a person that's at their workbench. It's Daedalus, the crafts person. So it's the person who's making things, but they're just sort of having fun making new shapes, and making risks in their playing with the materials. So the suggestion is to make as though you were beginning like a beginner, like an apprentice even.
But wasn't he the dude who made the wings?
Ultimately, yeah.
Right? Well, so is Icarus
Yeah. No, he's not referenced in that part of the myth, but yeah, the Mythic deck does attach itself to the myth, but in the story that it tells in the minor cards, the Two of Pentacles is when he's just beginning. There's something about your craft at the workbench as though you're an apprentice, and the kind of play that you can have, and the kind of risk that you can have. and juggling is part of it. So like the juggling, right? Or like what you were saying about, you know, like how doing roller skates. It's fun. It's a way of moving, but you've introduced an aspect of play. So this idea of a person who's like juggling is holding these materials aloft in this way that is a little bit scary. It's a little bit risky. It's also funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then what's the relationship of that to that the horse that's stuck in the mud?
Not stuck in the mud, just very grounded, not flying off on all directions, focused on the tasks at hand. There's a way in which that can feel heavy, but it's not contextualized that way here at all. It's just the artist taking care of the daily, which is really what an artist does, is they show up and they turn up for the work. So that's not the issue. It's the issue of like renewal. Letting something die and taking risks with the new.
I'm writing that down.
Yes. I love this other quote that Susan Liu just wrote in the comments. A new song, one that you've been wanting to sing with your laces tight, wheels greased, and machete upright. Oh, so good.
Watch out, folks.
Yeah, there's a great comment too about how this is also like this, we're at this moment of shift, right? Where we are going from the end of the astrology, right? Pisces, into Aries, the new beginning. So it's also death's arrival is also feeling quite timely and literal. It's a big circle. I love that you're taking notes. I want to be sure that we leave some time for questions from the group. I think that the Knight of Pentacles is really quite lovely. It's a very different kind of energy than the Fool card, which is more of the risk taker, the diving in type. This is more of a grounded reading, but the something having to die in the rebirth is a big archetype.
It is. I have so much to think about. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you. Can you say a little bit about something that you are working on or that you're looking forward to? It doesn't have to be just your creative work. It can be your other activities. I'd love to end with that.
I am looking forward to getting my second vaccination shot in a week. And then, a couple weeks after that, like visiting friends and seeing them and maybe even hugging them. I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Same. and maybe we'll be able to travel somewhere to see each other in person.
Yes, please.
I wonder if we should, maybe we could all together look at the vernal equinox spread. If you laid one out, Hoa, I did one with my cards, but you probably did yours too. There's also a question here. Maybe we could save this for the chat, but somebody asked a pretty big question about shifting into Aries and sort of the Aquarian shift that we're moving into this year, which we could talk about in terms of, sorry, my Siri's decided to chime in. But yeah, do we want to look at the vernal equinox spread that you laid out, Hoa? And then maybe we can maybe that'll say something toward this question. If we want to highlight it, we can just put it, I'll just read it. Should we just read it? We're at the tail end of Pisces season and shifting into Aries. Can you tell us more about what this shift might mean, especially for the American collective, after difficult Saturnian lessons of Capricorn?
Then the Aquarian shift into humanitarian energy, collective and society. Releasing and transcendence of Pisces seasons. What does it mean to begin again with the Fool card? So maybe this vernal equinox spread will speak to that.
Yeah, I'm really curious what you got for your spread. It's interesting because one of the cards, the card that was in the seed position, which is like the thing that I'm supposed to be conscious of planting and growing, is negative. So I'm like, what? No, I don't want to grow anxiety. Like, how am I going to grow anxiety? So what was your seed card, Dao?
So this is the number 1, right? This is my seed card, just Queen of Swords. So I read this one as, this is a strong card. This is sort of like truth and, mental energy also, kind of making decisions, and integrity, sometimes hard to represent. But my number 2 card is it like, what is the number 2? What was that supposed, I'm trying to, so this is water, what you need to cultivate in order to, activate the seed. So this one is interesting because I pulled the 9 of Swords. Let's see, which is a distressing card. This is sort of like the anxiety card or the awake at night, worrying card, or, do I have to worry more? What was how do you read, what was your seed card?
My seed card was that card. And I also, my final outcome was the Queen of Swords. So there's interesting like sword energy going on. Julie, Julie asked a question whether we should observe reverse cards. I mean, that's a personal decision. I never read with reversals. I read only with upright cards because all the cards have this sort of contextual information about whether you should bring forward their negative references or their more positive aspects. Yeah, it's interesting. I rather than kind of go through step by step, I kind of like to look at them more holistically. And it's interesting that the Queen of Swords is a card of, I think, of great power. I align her with myself a lot because she's also aligned with Aquarius in some systems. But she's a figure who is able to make decisions coolly and knows how to strategically align to make decisions and but also be beneficent, like, to her community. But there's a sense of detachment that is that's in service to her aims and her goals, which I really love to ally with in my own sort of trying to calm sort of the stormy emotions.
I feel like it's relevant to this week's events too, and kind of to, just the plight of women. I mean, it is sort of like this, that cool detachment that you talk about, or sort of the willingness to make those tough decisions that are like for justice, or rather than the heart-based decisions all the time, but they're still like, you can make those decisions, like you can still, be that, the sword, the decisiveness of the swords, but have that benevolence behind it.
Yeah, I think that the 9 of Swords for me is about like breaking through, because the nines I always think of as a sort of the last sort of step before the completion of the 10, right? So there's a way in which 9 signals to me like the tasks are nearly completed. So that's interesting, especially that since we are on this cusp of turning and renewal.
I did pull I like the card for 3. I don't know if this answers anything for the collective question, but the strength card. So I guess I like to sort of read that as like, you know, it's a quiet kind of strength. It's a patient kind of strength, resistance. It's not a brute force type of strength. And maybe that's something like to think about collectively, or like, how do we keep going? What, you know, might be effective.
Yeah, I think of that strength card as such peaceful power. And like you said, it's not force.
Yeah. And that's a different type of fighting than we've had to do over the last year, I would say. Just collectively, like there's been a lot of yeah, those are sort of the things that come to mind.
Thank you for sharing your cards. There are some other people sharing theirs. Their moon and sun is quite astonishing combination to get. It seems very literal, metaphorically.
Do you want to open up the invitation if somebody wants to have a reading from Hoa? Might have a question they want to put in the chat. I think there's Divan staff people who are monitoring the chat that can help us choose someone or communicate with that person.
Yeah, you don't have to be identified, or if you don't want to be. As long as the question is open-ended, but not a yes or no question, and about yourself, not about other people, it can be really helpful to think with the images and the narratives of the card. So if you drop your question in the chat, we can choose from one of them to do so. I sort of specialize in reading cards for creative people. So it's a kind of creative question that can be quite generative. But the most popular question often is about love. And I will certainly answer 2 questions about love, which can take the form of love interpersonally, within community, within families. Koi Mai, let's hear your question. If you can form one and drop it into the chat, I'd be happy to pull some cards on your question. There's also a question about the roles of the vernal equinox spread of bloom, debris growth. I think that the design of that was meant to resonate with the themes of spring, and you could think of those terms as ways in which to respond to your question, right? So if the thing that you need to clear out, like in my case, the thing that I need to clear out is actually a card that had been trending for me for a long time, which is the Chariot, and I think it's signaling something very specific to me because I'd been reading my cards for a while, and that card was coming up. So I think it just depends. And here is Koi Mai. I'm so happy that you could be live with us.
I want to hug you all. I mean, I can't believe that we are speaking live because we were together at the residency in California, right? It's great to have a reunion online. Thank you so much for this event and to Divan for hosting it. It's been amazing. I really need this conversation today.
Thank you for joining us. And Koi Mai, do you remember we were supposed to see each other in Toronto because you were going to be reading from your beautiful novel, The Mountains Sing, here at Ryerson University. And that was dashed by something called the COVID-19 pandemic. So we didn't get to do that.
Yeah, and you put so much time into organizing it. I want to thank you for all your amazing work and support. I must say that the support of the community has been just so incredible. I think, you know, we champion each other, and you guys have been just amazing. So thank you. But I just want to compliment on how wise you are, you know, like, because I had a reading with you, like you did a reading for tea, right? You had a reading for me. You gave me really wonderful advice, and I took away so much from today as well, you know, your reading with T. So I have a question. So like T, you know, I'm also struggling a little bit to kind of because my life is like I'm in a period of big changes. We are uprooting ourselves from Indonesia to move on to Kyrgyzstan, and have to say goodbye to friends, you know, and move to a new country. And it's very far away from Vietnam. So to go to Vietnam, it takes almost a few days, almost a day. So, you know, my parents and my two brothers are there. So yeah, so I just want to ask you a question in general, you know, kind of how to manage mental health, you know. Something, I think mental health is something, you know, the pandemic has affected all of us, you know, mentally, and it doesn't go away so soon. So how do we manage it? I don't know.
That's a lot of change, and in a time of great change, it's a lot to manage. I'm going to go ahead and draw 4 cards. I just divided the deck into 4 piles so that I could quickly read for you. Do you remember the cards I don't remember the cards that you got when I read for you? I'm sorry. I do remember T's full, but I don't remember what cards came up for you when I read for you in California.
I don't remember the cards, but I asked you about the choices of my children. You know, because they were applying to go to university, my son especially, and I asked you about the choice of their career, and you had you know, you chose, you know, the cards that were selected, and you said that I should be confident with their choices and they are mature in their, you know, thinking and decision making. And it turned out to be right, you know. Both of them are really happy at university now.
I remember now. Oh, that's great. I'm so glad to hear that. Well, the cards that I drew for you, I'm just gonna share them one at a time. I drew 4 for your reading, and you got 2 significant cards. One is a card of totally new beginnings, the Magician. It's number 1 in the deck. And you can see the person here, like in T's card, there's that infinity sign. And it's a symbol of power, and it's a symbol of connection to things beyond the self, you know, large time. And the Magician, you know, they have the one hand up pointing to the sky and one to the ground. So it's the great card of the writer, right? Because the Magician is like, the pen is the wand, you know, you being able to travel across time, be able to retrieve messages from wherever we get them, pull them out of the sky and bring them to the ground, bring them to the page. So the Magician, whenever I see the Magician, it's like you have all the things that you need actually in this move, and you're going to be able to manifest for yourself and for your family. The other great positive card that you got next to it is this 3 of Wands. Dao, when she read for me, got a bunch of wands. And here you see the figures looking out to a horizon line as though there is a boat that's coming towards them in anticipation. are, you know, there's something, they're coming to meet their future, really. And it's a kind of gathering card where your vision is quite clear about the future, and it's set up in such a way that it feels like things are gathered as they should be gathered to manifest more, that magician. And there is also an interesting other major arcana card that some people get concerned about when they see it, the inverted one, or the Hanged Man, number 12 in the deck. No, don't be concerned when you see the inverted one, because not unlike the magician who had the infinity sign over their head, the hangman has a nimbus or a halo around their head. And it indicates that while this move is one that has these really positive aspects, there's also a sense and way of suspension. And the suspension might come as a feeling of having to like wait for probably the things that one waits for when you make a big move, which is like for your community to materialize, for your connections to be complete. But the beautiful thing about the inverted one is that it's an activated space where you're really like collecting your power and the ability to have new understandings in this new place. You also got in the fourth and final card is a card of movement. It's the Six of Swords, and you can see the person is pushing their boat. You know, that it reminds me of the flat boats with the single person doing the paddling that we see in Vietnam, but here it's just with one pole. And then you see like the huddled figure here with the cloak, and then you also see this passenger, this childlike figure. And the swords are in the boat, but they aren't harming anyone, and they're be carrying along. And like one of the things I think about that is that whatever troubles that exist are moving along with you. It's not a problem, and it's a journey that doesn't have any obstacles, even as there might be troubles. They're being carried along. I would love
so much. Thank you. Okay, so I know I would do okay, and there be challenges to overcome, but it will be okay. Okay, thank you so much. I think the third card, it looks like the statue of Jesus Christ upside down. Is it like that? Ah, okay.
But he's not being crucified.
Okay.
I got the Hanged Man last time too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gui Mai. It's so great to see you. Dao, did you want to add anything to my interpretation?
Oh, I mean, I think you did a pretty beautiful job there. I guess when I saw that last fourth card, I was kind of like, you're going to take it with you. It's in your grief or whatever emotional stuff, your family, your like those concerns, like you're going to carry it with you. So there's probably still, more you'll be doing with it. You're not leaving them on the shore.
Thank you. And I think all of you guys have given me so much hope and courage. I think all of you have, overcome your challenges and do be very successful in your creative work, and also, do so much for others. So thank you. Thank you very much for being my inspiration.
Well, thank you for being with us, Gui Mai. You're part of the Divan community also. Should we open this up to, are there any questions in the audience?
Well, this might be, oh, wait, there is actually another question here. Which card do you feel like your relationship or perspective to has changed the most? This is more of like a meta question rather than a question where we consult the cards. That's such a great question. Well, like earlier when I showed T the death card, her response was, you know, sort of like to recoil a little bit. And that's totally natural. So is there a card like that for you, Dao, where you first might have had like strong negative feelings? For sure, like I was saying earlier, the Tower for me has gone through many different kinds of changes.
Yeah, I don't like the Tower card. I've had some experiences with that being like very predictive of like certain things in my life, like sort of falling apart. Had a very specific, like, you know, just personal stuff that I've gone through that like foretold. But I think ultimately what it really was asking was like the end to certain like also just mental and emotional structures that I was like enmeshed with. So I guess I've learned not to dread it so much in the external world, or, you know, try not to fear that, or be open to like what the changes might be if it really is like an external upheaval.
Yeah, no, for me, that it's definitely, it would be the Tower would be a good example, because I really didn't want the Tower, but you can't fight the Tower. And it's also like a really important information about how like a structure can constrict you, or actually even start to like deform, you know, like impinge upon your being in ways that aren't useful. Like it's not protecting you anymore. It's actually restricting you. Another card that I had a recent shift was the Seven of Swords, and thinking about that card. It's often talked about as a kind of self-deception card or a trickery card, but I've come to identify it with the ways in which we consult the things that are beyond us in order to get information. It's like the mind in conversation with the moon. And sometimes what that looks like is being willing to kind of adapt some guile and cloak and dagger, and moving through uncertainties through a side door into the known. And that actually came about when a fox came to my house right around Tet. And I realized that the fox is sort of the symbol of the Seven of Swords, and also reminded me of my like ancestral lineage, which is, you know, the ability to move inquisitively, curiously, beautifully, and skillfully, but not necessarily with any kind of force, going back to that idea of like peaceful power.
Mm-hmm. It's also a little bit of subversive power, like indirect action. I don't know that I can answer this question, but I wonder if there's anyone in our audience that can, or I know that horoscopes and astrology are read. My mother had also gone to someone that had done this for her children. I don't know that I've seen tarot cards or their equivalent in Vietnam. I don't know. Hui Mai, do you have some insight?
So the most common form of reading the fortune or reading the future in Vietnam is to read the palm of the hand. So, my palm has been read by many fortune tellers, and actually they are very accurate, So cards, I haven't seen cards being used so much in Vietnam, but people read by also looking at your facial gesture. For example, they can look at the ears and they can tell your fortune. And another method is to read the future with the Tale of Gil. The Tale of Gil, for those who know, is like, for those who are not familiar with the book, is an epic book of poetry, more than 3,400 verses. So if you want to read your fortune, for example, if you meet a person and you want to ask the question, should I fall in love with the person, and you go home and you do a prayer, and then you open the book, the Tale of Gil, and then you your finger will touch a passage in the book, and it will say the outcome of the relationship. So it's very popular. Reading from the Tale of Gil is a very popular method of fortune telling in Vietnam.
That's great. It's a kind of a bibliomancy, they would call it.
I also see like an experimental poetry project in that.
Indeed.
Let's talk about that.
My mother also got her fortune read with palm readers, and they said, oh yeah, you will cross the ocean. This is when she was like 17, 18 years old. And then it was like a sailboat in her palm. But then later when she had it read, like the sailboat had faded away. And so that was like, she wasn't going to cross the ocean again. And then she had my palms read, and they said, oh, you're going to be an artist. I was like, well, I can't draw, so I don't know what they're talking about. But of course, a writer is an artist. So they were correct.
My mom has a similar story where there was a fortune teller that said whoever she married before a certain age would be like ill-fated, and she did have a husband that died, and that she would marry somebody from far away. And she did. Oh, hold on.
Yes, the star chart reading is also horoscope reading is a tradition that I know my great-grandfather was his village's star person, and he gave my mother a reading when she met her future husband, and he said, you will stab each other like needles. He was also right. Metaphorically.
We are should we bring Isabel back? We're almost at 2 hours. Hi, Isabel.
Hello, thank you so much for this. I'm so hungry, I cannot leave. I was just like, up to hear all of you, and it's so nice. There's something, this intuitive readings of life and poetry, and yeah, there's something to it. And we find guidance where we can, and this one form find guidance. So thank you, all of you, for being here and sharing. This is not easy to do, right, in front of everybody.
How about as a closing out, what if, Hoa, would you pull like maybe just one card for Isabel and Divan? Like just sort of, I guess, it's...
I need to write this, not just much
equinox.
That's what I would like.
Yeah.
I need to get to myself a little bit.
That's true. Or if Isabel has a specific question.
Yes. So what is there for Divan? Oh no.
The Hermit.
It's an interesting card for a community to get, for sure, the Hermit, because it's a card of introspection. It's the number 9 in the deck, and in the mythic deck, as you can see, the robed figure with the crow is intended to illustrate the character of Kronos, right, the god of time. I mean, I think of this time, you know, honestly, the Hermit card makes sense because we're each in our individual spaces. We're actually not collected. So there's something about this time that is also divan time, that it will be each of us in a kind of internal searching. And the Hermit card's always depicted, or traditionally depicted, with holding up a light. So it's a way of trying to make sense in the sort of darkness of a wilderness that can feel foreboding or unknown, but to hold the light of awareness and introspection high in order for a kind of discovery to happen. It's a deeply intuitive card. As the number 9, it's also, I think of it as that magical number of gestation. So there's something deeply gestational that the card suggests for divan, to birth itself into its new space, or to its new expression, that's going to come out of this time of isolation where we feel separate and individual.
I think of it as an incubation period too. As in, there's a lot of, like, you know, growth or something happening in that period. It makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It resonates. Yeah, it's also rebirth for divan. Yes, and it takes a lot of incubation and reflections and imagining. Have a visions and make the decisions to point toward that direction and hold fast, and then trusting that people will come along and support, understand the visions, and for us to communicate what it is, which is basically for us to have the space to express ourselves and to be heard and help each other out. Really, this is really the bottom line. So when that is communicated and we'll get the support, then we'll become something new.
Thank you so much for this space, Isabel. Divan's been so important for my life as a creative person.
Yeah, it's good to hear.
I think that we can all echo that. Thank you, Isabel. I think it should be recognized just how much labor and love you've put into creating this community. I don't think we would be in this circle without you.
Yeah, I want to echo one last time a thank you to all of you. In a week when you should really just be receiving, to be extending yourselves like this. All of the extensions of love and care I've gotten have been largely from women this week, and it echoes what we already know about mutual care and how important it is and how sustaining it is. But I just wanted to say I really appreciate it. It means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Divan. Thank you for this event, and thank you everyone for supporting the events, for people who volunteer with us. We have so many projects coming up, which are really exciting, and I hope you continue to support the event. Thank you.
Yes, and there's a donate button somewhere, so we can continue. Okay, we said it. Thank you, and see you at next event. Love you all.
Thank you.